All right, with our handsome Mr. B. Hi, Bernie. So I'm just going to warm up with a couple little find its just to get him in the groove. You'll see that he is a naked man. He's not wearing his harness right now. So I wanted to warm him up with some movement behaviors first to get him kind of cozy. And then I know you guys had mentioned that at times he does go kind of and mouth the harness. So we're going to practice a bit with putting gear on and potentially taking gear off and kind of back and forth. Remember that for some dogs, if they're really flustered with touching or certain handling, or you're noticing that now all of a sudden it is becoming more problematic than it was when they were younger, we do want to make sure that grooming, vet care, and some of the different things we have to do with our pups are done in a way that makes it seem more fun than every time that they do it, it starts to get more and more overwhelming. So I know I mentioned a little earlier with Miss S how behavior and certain things that they're exposed to are kind of connected like a spider web. So if let's say our dog is having a not so great time, going to the groomer, and even though he's probably doing amazing and he's probably pretty comfortable, I'd want to make sure that your groomer, if like, let's say something was harder for him, that they pause and give him the chance to take a break and then maybe work on it slowly versus going for the full groom if he's having a hard time. If, for example, when your dog says, no thanks, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and we push it further, we may by accident create a dog that went from whispering their discomfort into now really shouting about how uncomfortable or how nervous they might be. Ready? So he's like, greatest day ever. Good job sitting. So if we're finding for Mr. B, there might be things that he was doing immensely well when he was a baby. And now that he's getting a little bit more mature, going into teenagehood, there may be certain things that now come springtime become harder for him. So I would just make sure that since everything is somewhat connected, that if he is struggling with certain handling skills, there is a wonderful Facebook group called Cooperative Care with Deb Jones. And it's all about getting your babe to be part of the dialogue when it comes to their handling, vet visits, and grooming needs, so your babe can feel safe while being in part of that dynamic. Ready? Find it. And I know you guys mentioned that when he was watching his videos, he was very intrigued by them, but then was also searching for when I said the find it. When I tossed it on the TV, he went to go look for it at your home, which I thought was very adorable. But then he was getting sad because I wasn't really there. So ready, Bernie, come. Gorgeous. So from these lovely little find its, we might warm up with a couple little recall moments just for a few moments, get him in the groove. He's doing a really nice job. Bernie, come. Yes. So for my guys, I reinforce every time they come. The reason behind that is I don't want a dog to sometimes feel that recalls can be beneficial and sometimes not. If, for example, you did want to do intermittent and sort of become almost like the slot machine, that's an option. But for recalls where it tends to be a very big safety situation, I like to make sure that every time I call my dog to me, it means come on down. Here you go, sir. It's still in my hand. There you go. Because I want to really create a great association that when you come away from something in the world and check in with me, it's a really good value from their end. So you're going to let him get distracted. He's just searching for that last little crumb. Bernie, come. Yes. So now that we warmed up with a couple great skills, notice how when he gets a little excited, he still leaps a little bit, but he's kind of, again, keeping himself off of me. If you're ever finding he's having a really challenging moment, do definitely, like I mentioned a little earlier for like Miss J as well. So with JoJo, I mentioned how the environment can drive behavior. So if all of a sudden everybody's coming into your home, nice, and let's say there's a lot of chaos, that can then fuel the fires to getting overexcited and then overwhelmed. So for puppies, jumping is the byproduct to feeling excitable, but at times nervous, and other times actually feeling like they don't know what to do and sometimes frustrated. Ready? Come. Yes, nice job. What a smart boy. So I also sometimes like to jackpot behavior. So a jackpot, again, is where you're feeding multiple snacks. If he gets a little jumpy, I just wait for all four on the floor and feed for that, even if it was sitting or standing, so whichever one. But a jackpot is where you're feeding several snacks, one after the other, to build up that doing that thing you just did has a lot of really good value from his perspective. Ready? Bernie. Nice. So sometimes we might work name recognition, other times throw in that come when called to the recall. So let's say, for example, grabbing for gear gets your puppy excited. I would start off by grabbing and then do another behavior like a find it. So again, I might sort of wiggle the gear and then do a little find it. So because if your babes see you reaching for the harness, see you reaching for the collar, and they either get one, really excited, or two, kind of nervous, and they try to romp away, we don't want to turn this into like a trapping moment where I lure you with food and then I slap on the thing. Because then the next time you try to lure them with food, they might think the harness of doom is coming to get me. And then that might create a less than likely moment where your babe is going to pay attention when you're luring. So we don't want to, again, poison the skill or poison the food by pairing it with bad stuff. So again, right now the gear is out. He could care less. He's doing some great find it, so he's not getting jazzed seeing the harness. So what I might like to do is sort of offer the harness to have him just check it out. And for sniffing or poking it with his nose, not for mouthing it, we don't want him like eating it, but I would have him sort of check it out and then feed him for that. So now checking out the gear is not a bad thing. Also, if he starts to do some jumping, don't worry, we'll just move him around, get him up and wiggling. And then two, this is sometimes the jumping. He's excited, he's a little unsure, he's working through those big boy skills, so don't worry. So now again, I might offer a little hand touch. Yes. So the benefit of a hand touch is to get your babe to practice booping with their nose onto your hand. So again, he's like, did you throw it? So right here, touch, and then yes. If you've been doing open palm for a high five or a paw behavior, feel free to keep the open palm for those skills. And then keep, for example, a closed fist or fingers for him to boop with his nose. So I might go again, touch, and then yes to feed. So ready? Touch, yes, and then feed him from that. So I'm just holding the gear. It's just kind of hanging out with me. And that's because I don't want to have the gear always equal, we're right about to step outside, or we're going to go do that thing. Yes. So typically I would have marked the moment I did with the YES with the food coming, but I didn't get to mention, again, touch, and then yes to feed. So every once in a while he's trying to give me toes. Ignore the toes if you really only wanted the nose booping your hand. He's like, hold up, lady. He's going to go get a drink. Thirsty boy. Well, it's like going to the movie theater. He's having his popcorn, and he's got to get a drink too. So again, touch. So in the beginning with hand touches, you could start off, for example, with the food in your hand, or take the food and like rub it on your hand so it smells delicious. But eventually you're going to go ahead and your hand is going to be empty and your food will come from the opposite side. So we might go, ready, Bernie? Ready? Touch? Yes, and then feed right after. So that way its targeting can be helpful. So the reason I like to sometimes do hand touches is then you can start to transfer that into other behaviors, like later down the road, a chin rest behavior, which would be great for cooperative care, vet, or grooming options. And that was very pretty. So I'm going to feed him for that gorgeous sit he just gave me. But then there could be also moments where, and I'm just going to grab a cough drop because I've been blabbing all day. So there's going to be moments where having him be able to target the gear could also be helpful. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can get Mr. Bernie's attention. He's hoping that any dot on the floor could be a find it, but sometimes they're just little marks on the ground, which sadly don't involve food. So we're going to go ahead, and I don't care if he's sitting or standing. I wouldn't have him be in a down position because it's going to be a little bit harder to put harness on. So I'm going to, again, offer the harness so we can check it out. And if he just doesn't really care to boop it, no big deal. So now what I like to do is have the harness open so you can see the head area. Some dogs do not love harnesses that go over their head. They prefer ones that have a clip around the neck. I know Sophie's and JoJo's has that. I know for Mr. B and other Mr. B, theirs are adjustable, but they only have the clip around the tummy. So it just depends on your dog. So I'm going to set him up where you can see him more at the sideways or sort of like this. And I like to offer food and feed for having him just come check out the food cupped in my hand while he goes closer to his gear. So again, I'm going to offer a little bit of food while he's near his harness. And I know you guys have practiced doing a bit of this already at home. I think you mentioned that with treats, he's been doing pretty well with certain things. If my puppy was showing signs, so notice how he's soft, his little tail is wagging, he's pretty comfortable. If when I did this, my dog's body language changed and he was trying to choose between feeling safe and taking a snack, that's going to create a lot of conflict with this sort of concept where the luring of the food through the harness might be like a trickery moment. He wouldn't have maybe done it had there been no food involved. So if your puppy has to start at a softer step, this might be too fast for some to feel comfortable. But right now, you can see that Mr. B is feeling pretty cozy, and we could slide it on and his body language hasn't changed. If this was really flustering, I would, for example, go much slower, but then what I like to do is I'll toss some food on the floor, and then that way, as I'm clipping one side, he could get some find its right there, and then we could do another little find it, and then grab the rest of the harness, and then now clip around his tummy. So for some puppies, this can be a great way to help the mouth end stay busy versus trying to eat the harness or eat your hands, or just go for the flapping parts of the harness as it's kind of dangling. And now that way, putting it on didn't involve mouthing the harness. So that can be really helpful if your babes tend to want to eat the gear by mistake. Because from their perspective, remember when puppies want to play, they use their mouths and they use their bodies and their paws to start wrestling. So from your puppy's perspective, you reaching down, getting low, going and using your paws might be almost like you trying to wrestle. So sometimes there can be some confusion and they start to mouth. Oh, right in the crack. I'm so sorry, Mr. B. The other option too is when puppies feel overwhelmed and they want more space, like when people go to pat a puppy and they weren't really interested, what the puppy tends to do is then mouth you. So sometimes, yes, they can be mouthing because they're exploring their world, checking it out like a typical puppy. But sometimes that mouthing is saying, please give me space. I'm not really interested in getting those caresses. So if you find touch is sometimes overwhelming or they think it's for their mouths to use, you can sometimes feed, do a little touch, and then feed again. But notice how he like backed away and he was like, ugh. So there's going to be moments where if your babes are not interested in the touching, there's ways to do some counter conditioning to build up that touch doesn't have to be spooky, and that touch could be the bringer of good, but we want to make sure there's still consent. And that's where, for example, sometimes when they go to the groomer or they go to the vet where they have to get something done, some vets will go very nice and slow. Same thing with some groomers. Others are more old school, which can be a little bit detrimental to the whole process. Because let's say your dog was really nervous and then they force them by holding them down or kind of coercing them into that behavior, your babe may start to have negative associations with the grooming or the vet visit, and then the visits get harder and harder, which then means they get gruffer and gruffer, and then eventually your dog is a dog that needs to be sedated potentially to do things because they're so either overwhelmed or so reactive to that environment or those handling skills. There are some babes, because of lack of experience, those things become hard too. So it doesn't always have to be that your babe was bombarded or was not very nicely treated. Sometimes, just like with people, some people don't love hugs. Some people don't want to talk in front of crowds. We all have our personal preferences. But let's say, for example, same thing with your pup. If we don't listen to those moments where they're like, I feel uncomfortable, and we don't help them through something, those uncomfortable feelings could turn really big. So we want to make sure that it's just progressing into the right direction. So we love the way he's doing something, keep rocking it. But I do love for vets or groomers or anybody that's working with your puppy that tells you the green flags and the red flags, in the sense like, he had a hard time with this, so we stopped. And that's a green flag. Red flag was like, oh, he had a hard time, so I strapped a muzzle on him and we did it anyway. And that would be a red flag. So there isn't moments where, of course, cooperative care and muzzle training could be beneficial for many venues, but we don't want to force or flood a puppy in a situation. Very nice little decision right there. He didn't see my find at that time. So we'll take a little break from some of that. And the harness putting on was beautiful. So we'll maybe go into a little bit with some loose leash walking. So with Mr. B, obviously in the beginning, just like with most of the puppies or even adult dogs, we're going to use food to lure the babe into a skill or behavior, but not to create more conflict. So if, let's say, your dog was scared of your neighbor and now you're luring them closer and closer, and they would have never actually gotten so close to your neighbor, then technically we might create a negative association with that whole dynamic. But also this is where other folks will be like, well, positive reinforcement didn't work because my dog stopped taking food. So just like with us, if every time you were exposed to something, someone gave you $5, but it really didn't feel comfortable, your value for money might go out the window because your discomfort around it was just not there. So we want to make sure, or their safety wasn't there, I should say. So we want to make sure that when we're using food or working on skills, that we're gauging how comfortable does my puppy look and are they having an okay time while doing those things. And obviously you can see Mr. B's loving it because his tail doesn't ever stop while he's out here practicing and working skills. Such a smart man. So I always tell my students too, when you're working with your puppy, look to their body language. If you do not know what they're trying to tell you through their body language, then there's going to be a lot of moments where you miss out on really important sort of clues to how your babe is feeling, but how well they're doing. So there's a lot of trainers too out there that sadly are more adversive and will punish for the wrong behavior. But remember, behavior for your pup is just communication. So it's almost like me saying, oh, I noticed you're feeling really anxious, but I don't believe in that. So I'm going to punish you every time I see you becoming anxious. You're not going to feel better around me. You're probably going to start to either suppress your behavior, but your feelings are still the same and or getting bigger while underneath. So we don't want to get rid of our dog's ability to communicate. We just want to address, well, why is my puppy feeling this way and how can I help them so we don't feel the need for behavior to get bigger. Nice job. So one of my favorites as well is like the positive interrupter, which you'll see that we do a lot of little find its with scatter feeding and then checking in. So notice how he keeps orienting back to me and he's doing a really nice job. We want him to think that orientation back to the handler has a lot of great value. Excuse me, I should not be drinking seltzer. I'm so sorry. So let's say, for example, we tend to tell the puppy no, or that's enough, or knock it off. Remember that since your babes don't understand culturally what's expected of him, is that a lot of times think about him as a furry little exchange student. And if you think about it from that perspective, maybe culturally for him, it's completely normal to do a certain skill, but not for us. So let's say jumping up on the counter and we're not loving it. I would typically, as opposed to instantly yelling or scolding at the dog, because they have no idea why it would be a good idea to go find some food somewhere else other than the floor or out of your bowl, or out of, let's say, outside in the yard, I would then do my little kissy noise. So my positive interrupter means that whatever you're up to, come check in for something good. So maybe I want my puppy to check in. Maybe I want them to move away from my toddler because they're about to knock her over sweetly. So there's going to be a lot of moments where my positive interrupter is a great way for me to get my puppy to hone back in. So right here, yes, smart boy. I do want to mark the moment he comes into my space because that's going to be the moment that I'm capturing the behavior of heading towards me is what I'm feeding for. So I'm just sending him away with a little snack. Yes. So you see, like, a lot of these concepts kind of have similar foundations. So you're building in attention to you. You're building in the skill of like loose leash walking. You're also building in like recall practice and honing into you from a distraction or the environment itself. Nice. So I'm going to send him away for another little snack. Yes. Smart boy. So he's very intrigued. He likes working. He's having a good time. So remember, when you're looking to videos on social media, does the dog look happy? So a lot of times people see dogs that are calm and they think, oh, that dog is so well behaved. Look at them on their place behavior, or look at them doing loose leash walking in a perfect heel position. A lot of those dogs, not saying you can't have these skills happen through a much more humane way, which is where I'd advocate for that. But there's going to be times where people will think well behaved was actually technically the dog shut down. So you want to see a puppy or a dog that has the sparkle in their eye, that has their ears up and upright, and that they don't look stressed out. So a lot of times people will think a dog panting looks like a happy dog. But if you look into their facial expressions or their ear set or their eyes in the sense of their pupils, you'll see a stress yawn or stress panting with a lot of visuals that show the dog is not actually happily panting. So like if you look at him panting, you'll see the rest of his body is soft. So I see like a loose, like I call them a wet noodle. So they're just very flowy and wiggly and soft. His little panting is him, again, expending some heat, but his head and his ears are nice and relaxed. His body is fluid. His eyes are soft. His mouth softly panting, not with an exaggerated pant, almost grin, with a lot of wrinkles on his face. I know he's a doodle, so he has a lot of lovely hair, but you would still be able to see stress in a doodle's face as well. So right now he's doing a stellar job. So we're doing a little find it. And I'm not even saying that you guys are stressing him out, so don't worry. It's just sometimes I like to throw out information because then other folks might learn, hey, that dog that I just saw in a video that I thought was being so well behaved was actually a dog that's scared to make a mistake because they've been reprimanded. I want a dog that feels comfortable and happy and safe to make a mistake so I can show them how to work a skill and not have to be worried about how they behave or interact with me or other things or other people or other animals. Nice job, sir. What a smart boy. Bernie's doing so well. So ready? So we'll do a little bit more with our loose leash walk in just for a moment. So I love the fact that he's so honed in. So you'll see that as he gets more comfortable, I have the food more towards my belly or my chest area, but I'm not going ahead and keeping the food low to try to lure him the whole time to my hand. Nice. What a smart boy. Because then as you're practicing, you could start to slow down and see if you can get a little sitting position. Oh, so smart. And it's not, again, always about, find it, perfection. It's more progression. So are we progressing? Are we getting more fluid? Are we getting more comfortable? Are the skills getting more refined? He's doing stellar. Good job, sir. What a brilliant boy. He's like, greatest day of my life, buffet time. So we're giving Mr. B just a little breather, and then we're gonna work a few more skills in just a minute because I wanna do some play with him too. So we'll give him a little break, but Mr. B will do maybe one more recall. Bernie, come. What a good job. You are so smart. So, oh my gosh, chewing, maybe not the greatest. There we go. We'll do a little find it, give him a little break, and we'll rotate through some practice.